All right, we are recording.
Have you ever heard of maybe roid rage or acne issues or ED issues, or maybe that you're increased risk of stroke because of testosterone? Well, we're going to actually talk about all these and a lot more in this week's episode of Too Much Test, episode number 2. But before we get into that, we are not doctors. We are not recommending anything that we talk about in this video. It's strictly for entertainment and educational purposes. What's up, guys? How you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. How about yourself?
Awesome. What'd you think of the intro?
It's good.
So let's start off with some of these things here. Let's start with roid rage, because that's one of the things that I actually just had a conversation with a buddy of mine. He's got diabetes and he has kidney related issues at this point, and his testosterone's super low. And he's telling me how he's afraid of testosterone because of roid rage. And I'm curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are on this.
It's interesting. I mean, it's definitely not like you see it portrayed in the media. You know, you take testosterone and you start beating up your girlfriend, or, you know, just punching people or breaking stuff. It's not like that at all. For me personally, the best way I think I could describe it is testosterone is a personality enhancer. So if you have a short fuse and you're a dick, you're going to be more of a dick with a shorter fuse, you know, on testosterone. That's my personal thought on it. If I'm on higher doses of test, there are some times where if I was at a normal test level, I'd be like, but then that little extra push is like, all right, I'm gonna address this. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
What does a higher dose of test mean to you? Like, what is that? So I have a reference.
Hypothetically, it would be like 500 milligrams.
Okay.
I've never actually done that, but hypothetically, that's what it would be.
Of course. So no, you never do that. Dave, what are your thoughts on that? I've got something to share afterwards.
So for me, at least, for like TRT, for instance, it's more of like, it just makes you feel like more of a man. So you do have, I wouldn't say aggression, but I'm naturally very mellow. I'm easygoing. So I never had any issues with that. It makes you, like he was saying, it makes you more of what you are. But the thing with testosterone is I never really had that quote unquote roid rage that we see in the media. The way we see portrayed in the media is usually, first off, these are hotheads. So they're getting that part of their personality enhanced, and they're not on just testosterone. They're on probably tren or a progesterone-based steroid, because progesterone, you want to talk about feeling emotional or hormonal, it feels much worse to be high on progesterone than high on estrogen. So that's what we see with that roid rage, is usually the drug related to tren. Is that what's dictated, but they just call it steroids, right? There's something like steroid, birth control is a steroid. So
yeah. Correct. There's actually there's a movie that my brothers are in, and one of the things that people don't talk about in terms of the media is that like everything is sensationalized. So when they would film a scene, they would have to do it 40 times just to make it more exaggerated than it needs to be, like 100%. But I agree with what you guys are saying. But then I also found this study over on PubMed, the effects of superphysiological dosages of testosterone. And they basically tested 40 normal dudes between the age of 19 and 40 in different groups with testosterone. They did 4 groups. They did like a placebo with no exercise, a testosterone group with no exercise, a testosterone group with exercise. And they were interviewing them, and they were also interviewing their spouses. And there was no change. They measured like, were they more irritable, like inwardly or like outwardly towards others, or these kinds of things? And there was no change. So it goes up. The data is pointing in exactly the same direction. And I have never had any issues, or, you know, it's like you were saying, if you're normally a douche, you're probably just going to be more of a douche.
What's crazy is at the end of that study, it says super physiological does not cause more aggression, but that does not mean that even higher doses couldn't. So they leave the door open as, you know, hey, 1 gram doesn't do anything toward aggression, but if we jumped it up to 2 grams, maybe, you know, I like how they left that open there.
Well, let me add a little bit of clarity to super physiological, right? So when we're talking about super physiological, it really has to do with one year above normal ranges. So technically, super physiological could be 300 milligrams, but in clinical trials, usually when they're talking about super physiological, sometimes they do trials, they do 200s, which are normal ranges because you're usually at the upper normal. Super physiological, sometimes they consider 300 at the super physiological range. Obviously, it's codependent on how that person absorbs it and everything like that and titrates. And then the other group is usually 600 milligrams. So they do have, and people don't talk about this. Like we literally have clinical trials of them doing 600 milligrams. When I think super physiological, I do not think 300 milligrams. I think 600 milligrams, but technically 300 milligrams on paper could be super physiological. And you can get prescribed that from any TRT doctor, endocrinologist, anything like that. So I just want to add a little bit of clarity. When they say super physiological, it kind of leaves it open to whatever they are testing. And they probably, if we dove into the study, I'm sure they would say, but I'm sure it was like 300 milligrams or 600 milligrams. One of the two is usually.
Yeah. So one of the things that my buddy also brought up, because he's there's a lot of things in like life that he's just not. He didn't say this directly, but it came across this way that he's just not doing in life, which we know is a huge benefit of like testosterone. But the other thing he mentioned was that his dad had died of a heart attack, and he was afraid of testosterone increasing like stroke risk and like adverse cardiovascular events. So have you guys seen anything on that?
I mean, I see from what I've seen is a lot of these older studies is where they showed stroke, prostate, heart attack. And I think a lot of the newer ones are showing that there's either a very loose correlation or there's not there's not really a correlation. I know for a long time they thought that prostate cancer was caused by testosterone, and now they're starting to see that it's not caused by testosterone, but if you have it, and you take testosterone, it'll exacerbate the cancer.
Okay.
And
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
No, you go ahead first.
So there's a lot of data out there showing from the other point of view, right? From low testosterone increases risk of heart disease, like cognitive decline, adverse cardiovascular events, and that's not talked about. But they're like, testosterone is bad; it's going to increase this and that and the other thing. But reality, low testosterone increases these risk factors that people are like fucking scared of, or whatever the case is.
Yeah, so this is like what you were referring to is like older studies. We have a lot of data now. We even have super physiological data that people are kind of doing their own clinical stuff on the side within senior areas and stuff like that. But just strictly on a testosterone basis, when you're talking about stroke is actually the most dangerous side effect of testosterone. I will be honest, like that is a real thing, but it just has to do with elevated red blood cell count. So you need to figure out what your body at your dose, which is 200 milligrams, 100 milligrams, you probably won't have issues with it. 200 milligrams, probably have some issues with it. And then 300 milligrams, like wherever your doctor is prescribing you, you have to figure out what rate you're increasing your red blood cell count production to figure out when you need to at least donate blood or dump blood, because that's actually the number one risk is stroke. So do have to talk about that stroke factor. So the stroke is a risk. Now, when it comes to like cardiovascular diseases, what you were just referring to is the lipid profile, essentially. It improves, if you have bad testosterone levels, it improves lipid profile 100%. It's been proven time and time again. Even in short-term research, it shows it. Long-term research, phenomenal. Shoot, Cialis and Viagra, they don't even talk about it. It literally clears out blood to make sure that you're not getting clots and stuff like that. So if your testosterone levels are off and you're controlling your testosterone levels, you're controlling your estrogen levels from it, it will actually help you cardiovascular wise. You have to be careful with the red blood cell count. But and then when you're talking about super physiological ranges, everyone's threshold is different. Like we were just talking, you were watching my blood work video. I actually, and I'm just open about it, I did go super physiological just to see if I could crush my cholesterol profile. Because in paperwork, once you go super physiological, the cholesterol profile, the HDL on paperwork reduces by about 25 to up to 40%. And the LDL has an inverse relation to it. So obviously it does the opposite direction. Whereas in my blood work, guess what? Perfect. Literally perfect levels. And
so what was your HDL and LDL?
Off the top of my head, my HDL was a 57 or 59, so which is phenomenal for a male.
Yes.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
And then my LDL was a 99.
Okay. So it's right on that cusp of,
Yeah, and I do want to clarify that, like, my diet, because I haven't really been doing a quote unquote heavy duty bodybuilder diet right now anyways. I've been eating very, very lax. I've been eating as much food and stuff like that. So technically my cholesterol profile should have been hit relatively hard. And I just wanted to go on record that literally it is bio-individual. Like, super physiological conditions are very bio-individual. And that's, like, just referring back to that study. Everyone's different. But on paperwork, it usually does take that hit. Where you do have lipid profile issues once you go super physiological, in general pop, right? Like, I may be an anomaly, and so I will apply that to another individual, right? That's why we have doctors running our blood work and stuff like that to make sure that we don't have those issues.
And when you talk about stroke, like, as I think I was taking a look at it, and you were taking a look at it from the standpoint of TRT, but it's good if you're talking about stroke, you have to consider the dose for where you're at, because testosterone in and of itself doesn't necessarily increase the risk of stroke, especially if you do some type of fucking preventative shit. Not a crazy amount, just a little bit if you're in the TRT range, for most folks.
Direct but indirect relationship, correct. 100%.
Yes.
You know, what's interesting is I saw a couple of different studies, and I don't remember them exactly, but I remember the general gist was that they're starting to think that the higher hematocrit levels from just TRT, not lifestyle based, are not as bad as they once thought. I mean, obviously, it still it still can happen. You still have to monitor it. Check your hematocrit. I donate blood like once every 4 to 5 months, just not even based off blood work, just to do it. But another interesting thing I saw is they studied these people that live really high up elevations, and they were seeing hematocrit levels of like 60, 64, 65, but these people aren't like stroking out and falling off the mountain, but their bodies have adapted to that because that's where they're born, that's where they lived. So it's interesting, that.
Because I saw something similar to that too, because people think that the hematocrit is going to cause the issue, but that link is not even clear, because there's some data that you were just presenting there, but also there's, and I don't know specifically what it is, but there's a little bit of a difference between the what is increased for stroke risk versus what is actually increased with testosterone. And the link there is not 100% sure. But hey, this is what happens when this happens, kind of thing. But it's definitely something that needs to be paid attention to, and more research in the future. You mentioned cholesterol, like that's a common thing that's mentioned, or a common issue for like a lot of people. So have you guys had any issues with? Obviously, you didn't have any issues, Dave. But testosterone levels, did you have any issues?
Let me actually pull up. I mean, I think the last time I got my HDL, I think it was 39. I have this little comparison, but I don't think I've updated it.
So I got to know what you guys are doing for yours. I'm going to be checking mine probably in the next couple of months. My HDL was 26 last time, and then I made some dietary changes, but I haven't done anything else to that. And my LDL was 98 or 99. Total cholesterol was only 160 though.
And then that's pretty good. That's not bad.
But I still prefer my HDL a little bit higher than 26 or 27, whatever it was.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll share. I can. Well, I have to go back over here. You guys keep talking. I was going to share my screen. I can show you.
So, Dave, what are like cholesterol? Generally speaking, is a relatively common thing that needs to be paid attention to, at least from a lifestyle standpoint, with testosterone, at least in the TRT range. Not that it's a huge issue, but it's something that needs to be paid attention to, but should be paid attention no matter what.
it should be paid attention to no matter what. It literally doesn't have to do with testosterone replacement therapy. It literally does not. I guarantee you, if you fix your diet, you can improve your cholesterol. Now, when you're talking about super physiological, like if you're cycling up on actual like a gear cycle, then like you're gonna crush your lipid profile. Like period. Like I may be an anomaly case where I don't know. I haven't like really tested it out. Like I haven't run like crazy amounts of gear. Like I don't just do that anyways. I just did it to see if I could crush it because I assumed it would and it didn't. But that is something that people need to watch their diet because that is a longevity approach. There are a lot of longevity things that we can talk about on the show, and we're going to dive into those subjects for sure. Blood sugar was one of them that we spoke about. So, but that cholesterol thing, that is one of the biggest issues that males have that I guarantee you I could hypothesize. The reason why males die before females is one, we're carrying more muscle mass. So the heart has to work harder. And then two, guess what? Our cholesterol profiles suck compared to females normally. So like it just is what it is. We're vulnerable to it.
Okay, check this out. So I'll show you. I have HDL and LDL from before TRT and starting TRT on a little graph here. Can you guys see that?
Yeah. Okay. So walk us through very detailed, like what you're looking at, so people could, for listeners, for people who are listening.
So no testosterone. This was before TRT. My HDL was 41 and LDL was 85.
Okay.
Then on TRT, HDL only dropped to 39 and LDL dropped to 78.
So how long were you on TRT when you were only on for a couple weeks at that point?
Yeah, that was about 2 months. 2 months
Okay.
on TRT. And then 3 months after that, my HDL dropped a little bit to 35 and my LDL went up to 88. Then it goes up to 37 and 83, 41.97, 44.11, and 35.85. So I'll stop sharing, but it doesn't seem like TRT has really changed my lipid profile really much at all. I mean, nothing outside of what the tolerances are for the errors in the test or,
So I looked at that briefly, but you had compounds at the top. Those were strictly TRT, because mine wasn't strictly TRT. There was some other stuff in there. So that's probably why mine was fucked up. But what?
What? Oh, you're saying, was there any other activity outside? Hypothetically, maybe. Hypothetically, it's happened since I've been on TRT. So, I mean, I would assume that. Now, I know I didn't get blood work hypothetically on anything higher than a TRT dose. I know that.
Okay.
Got it. Well, so I've seen some lasting side effects with SARMs where it like crushes livers, like literally crushes lipid profiles, like bad. Like SARMs I've seen worse than actual testosterone and stuff like that. Like I've seen kidneys, I've seen liver. I mean, every single thing in the book, but I've seen it like more exponential with SARMs, which is super interesting because everyone's like, oh, they're so safe. And we've already dove into this topic, but SARMs have more of a lasting effect that I've seen than more of the steroid aspect of it. Interestingly enough.
So that's actually what I was researching with at that time. So when I go back, probably in September or something like that, I'll go back and get my blood work done again. And it'll be interesting to see if I've been able to manipulate. So I've made some dietary changes during that time period. I didn't add like any red yeast rice or krill oil. I wanted to test it first with just lifestyle stuff first. But it'll be interesting to see if that's still the case when I go back in there.
Yep.
What about
specific SARMs that you saw that were worse than others, or was there one that you consistently saw crushing liver and kidney stuff?
All of them.
Literally all of them. Literally.
Really?
And the funny thing is most of the blood work that I've seen is with the Austrian at lower dosages for a male. Like I'm talking like 15 milligrams of Austrian, and I've seen just crush. Like crush.
There's one study that a lot of people don't realize on LGD in young men. So it's around 76 people in this study. And
that's a big study.
And they did it on men that were relatively young, like early 20s to like in their mid 30s, I think it was. They gave them 0.1 milligrams. So you got, yeah.
It's like nothing.
And then they went up to 1 milligram per day for 20 days. And then they showed some blood worker. Yeah, it's a very interesting study to take a look at. I did a video on it, but you can see like their cholesterol's messed up. I don't know if they tracked their liver, but in a different study, they did track their liver, and you get to see all this stuff that like.
Oh my god, it's like it's scary the blood work that I've seen because like people talk about how safe it is, and like LGD, it's normal like 20 milligrams, right? That's like a normal thing,
And then they're taking 20 times what they did in the study.
Yeah. Well, and so the issue with SARMs is they literally cannot pass toxicity tests. Like they can't. And I got a message like when I posted it publicly, right? I posted a YouTube video on SARMs versus gear. And I went pretty much into details about blood work that I was seeing. Like I literally have hard proof of it. And they're like, and someone was laughing and they're like, well, can Anadrol or D-bol pass a toxicity test? I'm like, yes, it is a legal drug. Yes, it can. I was like, imagine that. Like the harshest steroid, well, not the harshest steroid, but one of the harshest steroids can pass the toxicity test, but SARMs cannot. And they've tried over and over again, and they're trying for years. They think that Austrian may sneak it in there eventually, but even that, they can't figure out the clinical dosage. And the issue is to pass the toxicity test, they superdose it, right? Everything gets superdosed to make sure that it's actually safe for humans before they even go to like mammal trials and then human trials kind of thing. So I just thought it was funny. Like I got that DM, like, the guy owns a SARM company, right? And that's why he respects my opinion. I'm like, dude, I was like, no, I'm telling you right now, yes, it does. Like Anadrol is legal, FDA legal drug.
But it's so I've seen some blood work too where it doesn't have that a tremendous amount because they did another study on RAD. This is on women, but they gave them 150 milligrams of RAD per day. 150 milligrams per day.
Of what?
RAD, RAD 150 or 40.
Oh, RAD. Okay, yeah.
And what I remember is them just talking about a couple transitory issues with the liver enzymes being elevated, but I don't remember seeing stuff that was impacting cholesterol greatly, or maybe it wasn't checked in that one. I don't remember, but like that would be, 150 milligrams of RAD
that's insane.
Destroy.
Yeah. I just did this at 10 milligrams, and it has profound effects. My hair, if I would brush my hair, like I would normally have like 4 or 5, I would have like 10. It actually gave me headaches for about a week, not like hardcore, but I would get a headache here and there. And I was like, man, is this stuff killing my brain? But it adds strength and hardness. And, that's what it does. But what's interesting is Tylenol wouldn't pass a toxicity test right now. But it was, but that shit, you can buy that shit at Walmart.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of SARMs. Like I enjoy researching with SARMs. I think they're like, I don't actually research with a lot of gear, and I just research with SARMs. But one of the things that SARMs definitely affects, as well as testosterone, or can affect, is fertility. So let's talk about fertility for a second, because that's something that my girlfriend and I have been talking about potentially having a kid next year. So this fall, I'm going to do a sperm analysis to check my shit and then start testing stuff and then check it in again a couple months later. What are you guys' thoughts on testosterone and fertility?
It's like the common, it's not necessarily a myth, but people say, well, if you're on testosterone, you're infertile. You can just do whatever you want, and there's be no babies coming 9 months later. And obviously it definitely lowers your swimmer count. There's no question, but there are there's professional wrestlers, professional bodybuilders that have like 2-3 kids. So the swimmers can get through. Nature will always find a way.
I had a buddy who is probably in his late to mid 30s at this point, and he started gear when he was 17, 18 years old. And him and his wife they won't like to have a kid now. So starting in November or December of last year, he was like, okay, cool, I'll go see an endocrinologist and I'll start, their protocol for, HCG and Clomid or whatever. And after about 6 months, I actually filmed a video with him, but it was so hard to keep him focused because his test levels were just like single digits. So I didn't even release the video because it was so bad.
Wow.
But after like 7 months, he still does not have any swimmers.
Wow.
So here's the thing. First off, Ronnie Coleman has like 8 or 9 kids. But, and I guarantee he was on cycle you're at.
He did like 3 grams at one point. He was telling me about, like, that's just a stupid amount. Like you're doing like 3 grams of gear a week is a ridiculous amount.
So this is actually when I first started coaching like 5 or 6 years ago. One of my clients got on testosterone and replacement therapy. And after like 5 months, he's like, so man, I'm going to have to cancel the services. I just knocked her up. He's like, I guess you can get them pregnant. Heads up. So, like nature does take, but the thing is like, I actually study under a fertility doctor. Like that's his specialization. And he's trying to rewrite the books on testosterone replacement therapy and basically crushing this myth, because you can keep your testicles healthy when you're on testosterone. HCG does that. But the thing is, does HCG actually make you that fertile? Well, first off, you can be fertile on just testosterone and HCG. But with HCG, all that it does is increase your semen production. It's luteinizing hormone. There's one missing link to it, which is FSH. FSH is what's going to make you produce sperm. So the swimmers, you don't have as many, but you still have them. So you actually have to replace it. And like on the streets, right, what people are going to talk about is HMG, which is a gonal, but it's a combination of the gonals. It's a mixture where it has some FSH, it has some LH in it. What a fertility doctor, if they're specialized, they're going to basically control your LH and your FSH levels. So they're going to use a gonal F, which is FSH, and they're going to use a luteinizing hormone, which is HCG. And guess what? You don't have to come off testosterone and feel like a female, not having sex drive and having to take Viagra every single time you want to have sex. And it feels forced every single time. You're like, oh, first off, I have pressure to get her pregnant. And then I have pressure to have sex right now, and I can't get an erection because I have no testosterone. So I'm going to take some Viagra and get a forced erection. I probably can't feel my dick because there's so much blood going into it right now. And like it's like a concoction for not getting someone pregnant is getting off and like not being able to reboot.
So I agree that it's way more sensationalized than actual reality. I think it's for people that are in the TRT range, for most people, it's probably never going to be an issue. With my buddy, though, he took HCG 5,000 at one point, like, because they kept testing different shit. At one point, he was doing 5,000 3 times a week, HCG.
Ooh,
got his levels tested.
Protocol.
Yes. Oh, yeah. He would get these cases, anyways. But
I'm
you go through it so quick. You go through a vial every shot.
That's great.
So he got his levels tested. He had super high LH, obviously. He had good in-range testosterone, but zero production. Came off about 2 weeks later. And so that goes down, and the test levels just tank. There was no production. Like LH, he doesn't have any at this point, basically. So, but that's an extreme dose. Like, and I don't mean to sensationalize that by talking about it all the time, but that was the experience that I had working with him on that thing. But because 99% of people, I think, like, I'm taking 225 milligrams. I don't think that it will probably be an issue. I mean, it could with the other stuff I experienced it with, but I don't think it will be an issue.
What do you guys think? So, like your buddy, I mean, if he's taking all that HCG, do you think adding in some Clomid would have helped at all?
So he did Clomid for, I think, 3 months, and he was so irritable with his wife. He was saying, he was like, I was like a little bitch. Like I didn't even release the video.
Wow.
Like the conversation, he was over here, then he was over here. That's one of the issues of low testosterone, right?
Yeah.
He showed me some of his blood work, and he's got single digit testosterone. And it was very hard to even have a conversation because it was like all over the place. I do that sometimes, but it wasn't like mumbling or saying the same thing 3 or 4 times, and just there's no lack of focus. You'd mentioned Dave, you'd mentioned Cialis and using that as an aid to help with like ED or just getting your dick hard because you got low testosterone for fertility. Then you got that pressure. One of the things is some people, and I learned about this today, but is a desensitization to like their dick. Can you, I mean, I had that personal experience. I'll tell that story in a second, but like, what are you guys' thoughts on that? Like, can testosterone desensitize your penis so that it's harder to have sex, or that you basically, is that actually a superpower because then you actually last longer? For some guys, that's an issue.
I'd say personally, I haven't noticed that. Personally, I haven't noticed that. I've noticed that with Jack Daniels, but not for me, not Tess. But I'm gonna say that it's probably man per man, but that it definitely can happen. And I know David had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, like when I lost my virginity, we were talking about this right beforehand.
Here's where we get demonetized.
Yeah, exactly. It was 4 hours later, and I hadn't gotten off, and I thought it was normal, right? Yeah,
you thought that's what everyone did. Everyone like set aside half their day and to do this, and that's why you only do it once a week.
Exactly. And you wonder why your significant other isn't putting out anymore, and then you realize you're like, oh. so I'm going to correlate testosterone and Jack Daniels in a second, by the way, since you already brought it up.
Interesting.
So every male is different. Males that have issues with estrogen tend to not have as much of an issue with the desensitization of the penis, because estrogen doesn't desensitize it as much as progesterone does. Progesterone desensitizes you big time, but it also has to do with dopamine. So if your adrenals are off and your dopamine's off, the release of dopamine is phenomenal for sensitivity in that area. Cabergoline is the drug that people use to counteract the side effects of progesterone when it counteract the side effects of tren. Well,
it lowers prolactin.
Huh?
Yeah, it lowers prolactin.
Yeah, it lowers prolactin. But what they don't talk about is it's a dopamine antagonist. So probably first off, when you're on tren, you're probably going to get better sleep on cabergoline anyways. But it actually adds sensitivity to the penis. Now, the first time I took cabergoline was obviously to counteract side effects of progesterone, prolactin. I naturally, before anything became a thing, I had prolactin issues or progesterone issues, like where my nipples would get, to this TMI, but my nipples would get filled with liquid. I wasn't like lactating or anything like that, but if I wanted to, I could probably get something out of it, right? But it's different than a lactation. Lactation is completely different. That's like actual milk. So I had this naturally, like when I was a kid, I thought I was like a freak or something like that.
Damn.
But it just depends on how you pathway your steroids, like your natural steroids. So when you're putting testosterone into your body, if you're going to pathway it down a pipeline, you're going to get more progesterone than estrogen, and that's what your body's going to do with it, then it is what it is. So cabergoline was my solution for it. I know there is Prami is another one that helps with prolactin, but that could be another solution. I don't know if it's dopamine antagonist off the top of my head, but I would assume it is. And it's not as strong as cabergoline.
And vitamin B6, I just read a study where there was cabergoline versus vitamin B6 at like a triple the dose that you normally take, and they checked the effects on prolactin, because B6 can actually increase dopamine without actually just being an agonist like cabergoline. So vitamin B6 lowered prolactin levels nearly 50%, where cabergoline was slightly more than 50%. So I just actually added in vitamin B6. In the study, it was 300 milligrams a day split into, they didn't say it's timing specifically, but they said a split dose. So I'm assuming morning, lunch, and dinner. And I just started doing this. I didn't know about the desensitization, or could be prolactin related. But when I was 18 or 19, I first had sex, I had the same exact thing where she was like, oh my God, this is like, what is going on right now? It's been hours and hours and hours. We were up all night having sex. And she was like, what is going on? And I don't know if this is TMI for you guys, but there's been times where I've had sex and pretended like I came, because I was like, I'm fucking ready for bed. I'm shit-faced and I want to fall asleep.
Yeah, so I never had to fake it, because it's harder when you're male faking it. But all related to Jack Daniels, because I didn't get to that part. Jack Daniels can affect your prolactin, like it's going to stop your testosterone first off, which can affect your sex drive. But if you're injecting testosterone, your testosterone is testosterone. So then we're going to talk about estrogen. It's still going to increase aromatization. If estrogen gets too high, it can affect penis sensitivity as well. Probably not as much as prolactin, but guess what? If you naturally have prolactin issues, you can have the same thing. I actually would get the opposite. I would get the opposite of alcohol dick or whiskey dick, as they call it. When I used to drink, it would actually sensitize me more. And I don't have 100% answer for you. That makes no sense.
So let me understand that, Dave. All right, so alcohol obviously kills your testosterone. It's horrible for your liver and stuff. How does alcohol affect prolactin?
So I would assume if we pathway it like we do normal steroidogenesis, then it would increase your prolactin, because it's not going to stop that pathway or anything. If anything, it's just going to stop. It's going to block the conversion of testosterone, right, and increase aromatization. Which the increase of aromatization is estrogen. But and I would really have to look at the chart. You know what?
But because
I literally do the steroidogenesis right here, and I don't ever pull this out because I have it pretty much memorized. Okay, so we have cholesterol, pregnenolone. Pregnenolone goes to DHEA, estradiol, testosterone, DHT. Let's see, where's progesterone? Yeah, so progesterone is going to be the start of it. And then, so you have pregnenolone, and pregnenolone can turn to DHEA, and then you can get it to testosterone. Progesterone can go down, and then it can convert to cortisol. So, I wonder if it's more of a cortisol issue than anything else.
But so alcohol would actually potentially increase cortisol, and that would have like a stress response in your body.
Yeah, looking at this, that would make more sense because you have cortisone and stuff like that. Which is an anti-inflammatory. People think cortisol is an inflammatory hormone. It's actually anti-inflammatory, like cortisone cream and stuff like that. It's literally like it's a progesterone base, but it's actually anti-inflammatory. But I mean, if the release of like insulin and stuff like that, it can start blocking receptors if you become insulin resistant, because alcohol does make you insulin resistant. I do know that. So you can have actually nerve blocking if that glucose, first off, alcohol, like it's converting to sugar, but if you're blocking that because the insulin resistance issue that does come with it, and then you also have the hormones, well, guess what? You're having a lot of stuff that's affecting nerves at that point. So there is actually, and I guess I never really thought about it so in detail until I just looked at the chart and I'm thinking about it. Because if you throw off your cortisol and it does affect insulin resistance, then insulin resistance, like you want to talk about organs dying off, blood glucose is like the number one thing that's going to kill anything in your body, like where you have to get it, like finger amputated or you start losing your brain and your memory and stuff like that. It's from too much blood glucose to the area. But I mean, if it's going to affect every organ of the body, especially if you're doing it at a systemic level. So it could be hormone related. It could be insulin, blood glucose related. I guess looking at it, there's just such a alcohol is like the worst drug ever. It's like there's such a downward spiral effect. Like I was just like looking at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was like, the pathways that it has to go down. Like it's like, okay, well, this isn't going to testosterone, so we're just gonna throw this into estrogen. But the thing is, like, progesterone starts before it gets to, like, progesterone actually can figure out a way to get into the testosterone, but if it's not going to convert to the testosterone, then it has to aromatize an estrogen. So you're probably just jacking up your estrogen through the roof. More than likely.
There's also, with alcohol, you get basically almost like your liver blocking the metabolization of estrogen. So you get reuptake of estrogen. Your estrogen also increases that way too. You had mentioned prostate cancer and related issues, which is like another thing that like a lot of people think about when they think about testosterone. So first of all, because a lot of people probably don't know like what kind of issues related, what issues would you have with if you have prostate related issues, and then is it like a big concern with testosterone?
I think one of the worst things is a lot of these new TRT clinics are popping up. They're sending guys finger prick tests to do their labs. Like they're doing that. I mean, like, okay, the finger prick test, you can get, an idea, just a ballpark. Okay, I'm on the lower end, I'm on the higher end. But I mean, you're not going to get PSA results from a freaking finger prick test. So these guys are on TRT, 200 milligrams a week. And who knows? The PSA could be like 11, 12, but they don't know. And, they may never know. So, I mean, I think we all are in agreement that getting blood work often and thorough is obviously ideal, even if you're not on TRT. But yes. It's pretty crazy that, these TRT clinics are just cutting corners so they can do that $99 a month and send you the cookie cutter protocol. And they're really, I mean, they could freaking be killing people. I mean, not, you know what I'm saying, but.
Well, I did tested one of those, not the clinics out, but one of those prick tests, just because I was like, hey, this would be an interesting video to do. And when I did more research on those tests, those prick tests are relatively accurate for free testosterone, but you cannot test total testosterone with those prick tags. At least when I did the video a year ago or whenever it was, you couldn't check total testosterone. So there's no fucking way you're checking your PSA for that. So prostate, like that's it's sexual related issues, cum related issues, ejaculation related issues,
urine all the time if it's enlarged.
Yep.
So Dave, what do you like? What are your thoughts? Is taking testosterone in a TRT range going to affect PSA levels, or not PSA levels, your prostate? Because I've read some stuff on that as well.
Yeah, so I'm just going to tell you. So guys may have read more research than I have, but as far as why it can create prostate issues, first of all, inflammation of the prostate. Me personally, everyone should be on Cialis. Every single male should be on Cialis. Every single one. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you do. It's a cheap drug. Stay on it.
We're not doctors.
Huh?
We're not doctors.
Yeah, we're not doctors. Take it anyways. No, it's fine. So, thank you for the reiteration there. Yeah, like 5 to 10 milligrams a day, which is a lower amount. Not 20 milligrams a day. You'll probably be rocking around with raging erection. And that reduces the prostate inflammation, and it also has other benefits with the heart and everything else. But it can inflame the prostate. The reason that it is testosterone loves to bind to the androgen receptors near the prostate. That is just where testosterone wants to go. Different drugs or different steroids are different. They like to bind to certain areas. It does like the prostate. So can it increase the odds of prostate cancer? I would say 100%. I mean, we just know the mechanics of the drug. Now, have I seen research that says otherwise where it doesn't? No, I just know the mechanics of testosterone, where it wants to bind to, causing inflammation of the prostate, which having an inflamed organ, you're going to eventually have issues with it. I think if you are taking probably your Cialis daily and you're not prone to prostate cancer, is it going to? Probably not. And that's just like from a theoretical standpoint, and like because I do see studies that obviously it can increase your odds of prostate cancer. A lot of things can increase your odds of cancer anywhere, but that one in particular, I can see it being relatively an accurate statement with the increase of prostate cancer if you're not reducing the inflammation from the testosterone. But if you're keeping the inflammation in check, probably is going to be much lower odds. I don't think that it technically would be as much of an issue. I think it's more of the enlargement of the organ and being on overwork.
So there is some research out there, and it doesn't appear that it's as clear as you would think. Like the expression of 5-alpha reductase is very high in the prostate. So you have testosterone that's going there, it's getting converted to DHT, and we know that happens, but the link between like prostate growth or prostate cancer is just not there. Prostate potential, like benign hyperplasia, like the growth of the prostate, potentially there's a little bit of some stuff, but not necessarily. It's not like this is definitely this. That could be an issue, but lifestyle factors, as you mentioned, is probably what's actually causing the difference. But from a cancer standpoint, I haven't read anything, and I've tried to find stuff to be like, oh, is this an actual issue that we should talk about more often? And I can't find anything where it's like actually linked to prostate cancer.
Yeah, they may have studies eventually, because people do, and maybe in steroid abusers, like long-term studies of these steroid abusers, we may start popping up. But we're just now getting long-term research on people that have quote unquote steroid abused for like 15, 20, 30 years. I mean, they're just now getting that age where they've been doing it for a long time, and they probably don't abuse steroids anymore. And that's probably the populace that they would have to look at to see if it actually increased it. But in all honesty, cancer is usually like a methylation issue. It doesn't normally not related. Like if you're genetically prone to it, or you have methylation issues, misreplication of DNA and stuff like that, that's usually where cancer comes into play. So I think that's almost everything, though. I don't think it's just like this case. Yeah, you see people smoking that never get lung cancer. They're 110, 120 years old. But then you have someone that smokes one cigarette a day or one cigarette in their lifetime, they get lung cancer the next day. Like literally, and why they were just genetically prone to it, or they had a methylation issue and you exacerbated the issue. So sure, if you have the issue, it's going to exacerbate the issue. But
so the methylation issue would just be like a broken or damaged or mutated cell of some sort that's continuing to have proliferation and continuing to grow into cancer, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Well, we talked about DHT I did for a second. One of the things that is associated with DHT is hair loss, which is like being like, I don't want to take it. I don't want to lose my hair. I look good as fuck this way, right? So, what do you guys experience? I have my own thoughts on this, but I'd like to hear what you guys think.
Well, real quick, I actually want to jump back just to PSA and your prostate. This is a PSA to get your PSA tested, because if you're not familiar, when you get prostate cancer, one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to get all of the testosterone out of your body. So A, you got fucking cancer. B, your testosterone is going to be down to 0. So imagine how you're going to feel. So that's why it's so important to get blood work. If you see that PSA creeping up, talk to your doctor, get the test that you need, because any cancer that's caught early is much better than late, obviously. So
and that's, it's good you bring that up, because we didn't mention finasteride or dutasteride, but finasteride, I believe, is the number one thing prescribed for benign hyperplasia of the prostate, I think. Because
I'm not sure.
Because finasteride basically blocks or stops like an AI would for estrogen, but finasteride does that to the 5-alpha reductase enzyme. So it reduces the conversion to DHT, and it has that effect on the prostate. But one of the reasons, tying into like the hair thing, another reason people also use finasteride is for hair, protecting their hair or regrowing hair or whatever. Have you guys had that happen with yourselves a lot, or?
Yeah. So I actually need to redo my video on it. I did a really detailed video on it. So I tried natural products. I did have hair loss issues at one point in time. I still do. I shed hair, right?
Wow.
Nothing I can't control. I mean, a full head of hair, right? And I never had my hairline recede or anything like that. It was about to start doing it, and that's when I took a more medical approach. So my experiment, I did my own experiment with natural products, shampoos, curcumins, oil, stuff like that, right? And I prevented the hair from falling out. There was also a carbon-60, which is a radioactive isotope that they basically use in olive oil as a delivery agent, and actually did increase. It did grow my hair back a little bit, but I was not treating it for falling out at the same time. I was only trying to regrow it. So I was trying to regrow it at a rate that wasn't good enough for the fallout. So that was a mismatch on my part. But the issue with carbon-60 is radioactive, so you don't want to combine different products with it because it's driving through the cells, and I didn't want to mess with that. So I did one at a time with that one. Found some shampoos that were pretty good. And then when I took my medical approach, I regrew my hair, and this is after a year and a half. I regrew my hair in literally a month and a half to 2 months, all of it. So like, I guess the hair follicles didn't really die off. It was a combination of finasteride, finasteride and Rogaine. I was using the 10% topical, by the way, is a lot better than the 5% topical. So I 100% recommend the 10%. The issue with Rogaine is you start shedding your hair faster. And the reason why you start shedding your hair faster is it kills off the weak follicles and it comes out. So just like there is a shedding process that comes with Rogaine. And you pretty much need to stay on Rogaine. Why? Because your hair's still going to shed. You didn't beat your genetic displacement for hair loss. So that's one thing. Then I took the finasteride and I started at 1 milligram. 1 milligram hardly did anything for me.
Per day? Were you doing one per day?
Once a day. Yep. So it was 1 milligram and hardly anything. A little bit, but hardly anything. I was on a DHT derivative, by the way, at this time too. So it was a good time to do this experiment. 2 pills, so 2 milligrams a day. Started to see a little bit of a difference, but then when the DHT started building up on my system, I saw it pick up again. And then it was falling out. I was regrowing it as fast as it was falling out to 3 milligrams a day. And finally, I kind of like overlapped that threshold where I'm like, okay, a little bit less hair falling out. Still falling out, but I didn't want to jam a bunch of finasteride in my system. Usually, like you're going to be doing like 5 milligrams of finasteride. I didn't really want to go that high, but this is where it got really interesting. So I ended up finding a shampoo that works to basically counteract side effects of DHT, but it's not a DHT blocker. Ninzarol AD, it starts with a K, the active ingredient in it, and it is a chemical, so I was trying to avoid that stuff, right? I combined that.
Is it ketoconazole or something?
Yes. Okay. That's exactly it.
With
Yeah,
it,
it's a
but
weird name. So it's almost looks Japanese, the name. But the I combined that with the Rogaine, and I just was too lazy to take the finasteride, right? Like I just stopped taking. I started traveling for a few weeks, and I just took the shampoo with me, and I took the Rogaine with me, and the hair shedding was about equivalent to with finasteride. When I dropped that DHT, and first off, during that 2-week period of time, I was eating less food, and as soon as the finasteride was out of my system, dude, I put on like 3 to 5 pounds of lean tissue. Like I just was like, boom, blow up, and I'm like, what is it actually that drastic? And then I literally backed off everything because I had a gut issue. Backed off everything, and I was just on testosterone, and I still was retaining everything. I was still getting bigger. And I'm like, is finasteride really that detrimental towards muscle growth? And the answer is yes.
Wow.
And am I taking finasteride ever again? No. As soon as I came off the DHT derivative, by the way, and I was just doing Nizoral AD, the active ingredient you just talked about, combined with the Rogaine. And by the way, I'm not following the instructions on the Nizoral AD. I do it twice a day. Twice a day is like optimal for everything with hair loss, from my personal experience. Besides the finasteride, I did once a day, obviously. So like my hair is like full head of hair. Like don't need finasteride. So I'm kind of opposed to finasteride because I didn't have erectile dysfunction or anything like that. But I did notice drastic differences on how much muscle I could grow, especially if you're taking stuff to try to grow muscle.
Yeah, you don't want to take a pill that's hindering that.
So I have I've been losing my hair since I was 19 years old, and I really started to notice it a lot more last year. Like this was very, very thin, and which I'm pointing at the top of my head for anybody listening, right at like the widow's peak area, and then above the temples, this was all like gone back about an inch down. And starting in December of 2019, I think it was, or no, 2020, I started a finasteride 1 milligram either once or twice a week because I didn't want to kill my DHT levels, my serum DHT levels. And then there's a chemical or a research compound called RU58841, which you guys are probably aware of. And as an anti-androgen, it is wow. Within about a month, I could tell a difference. I would get out of the shower, the mirror was right there, I could start telling a difference. I also did minoxidil, which is the active ingredient in Rogaine. And I did those two, minoxidil and RU twice per day. And then on the weekends or maybe Sunday and Wednesday, I would take a finasteride. And I saw incredible results with that. But I think for people who are listening, I think that the biggest factor in all that, and you guys I'm sure have seen the same exact thing, is if somebody has the predisposition to losing their hair. Yeah. I mentioned I've been losing mine since I was 19. I'm 36. My dad's completely bald. My brother is bald. My grandfather was completely bald. I was like, oh fuck, this is where I'm going. I knew that at a very young age. So if that's your family, you probably are just going to accelerate that process.
Well, let me take a step back. First, I do want to ask you a question about the RU because I've heard of it and I didn't do research on it and I didn't it wasn't really my thing. I was just like, whatever. So I did want to add my grandfather, my father, every male in my family has a full head of hair till the day they die. Full head of hair. Me and my brother, massive hair shedding issues.
That sucks.
Naturally.
Damn.
So what do you think? Because the two things that are related to hair loss that most people don't pay attention to, they pay attention to DHT, but they do not pay attention to stress and nutritional deficiencies. And those two are two fuckers that have a big impact, but people don't talk about those. We didn't even mention them, but those two are super important things.
Well, we're Americans. We don't want to actually change our lifestyle to fix stuff. We just want to put pills and creams, and we just want that. I was going to ask you guys: have you guys ever heard of latanoprost?
Wait, what is it called?
Latanoprost.
I have, but isn't that for melatonin or something like that?
No, it's for the prescription medicine for growing eyelashes for girls, and they started selling it. The compounding pharmacies sell it as a topical formula mixed with what was that, ketoconazole. So there's lots of different stuff that's out there that, you know, you can't get at the grocery store.
Dude, so that drug in particular, I searched so hard to try to find it, the topical, because I didn't want to take finasteride orally. I could not find it anywhere. Okay, you're gonna have to message me after this and type it to me where you found it, because like if it's from my HRT clinic, wherever, like if I can get it from my HRT clinic, I'm sure.
What was the name of it again? I want to write it down.
Latanoprost. LATAN. I'm sure you'll be able, it's called Latisse.
It's like PROST, I think.
Yeah, PROST. Latisse is the prescription.
This is how do you know the background story behind that drug in particular, like that topical?
Oh, the RU?
No. Latanoprost.
No.
So latanoprost is not actually meant for regrowing hair originally, right? Its original intention was for like glaucoma or something like that. It was an eyedropper format. And then they realized that these people, their eyelashes were growing really fast.
Huh.
And they're like, So they applied it to eyelashes and they realized the eyelashes grew. Then they applied it, so it was a beauty product. And then they applied it to the eyebrows and the hair grew in their eyebrows. Then they applied it to the scalp and they realized it worked for the scalp too. So that's where they found out it was an eyedropper, and then it regrew the eyebrows. And then that was not what their drug was originally intended for. And they figured out that it worked that way.
I'm surprised there has to be some reason it has been marketed for male pattern baldness. There's got to be some reason.
Maybe payoffs. I don't know.
So how does that, because minoxidil for Rogaine, like minoxidil is like a vasodilator. Do you know how like that works? The latanoprost? He's looking it up. You may know in a few seconds here. I actually don't know, but if you feel like glaucoma, right, it probably has to be some type of vasodilator of some sort, because you're trying to basically get rid of that extra oil and stuff like that and get nutrients to the area. So I'm sure there's some type of vasodilation involved, but I do know it works better than minoxidil. I do know that for a fact. Interesting. I think I want to try that.
I couldn't find it anywhere, man. I was like, dude, I was searching like my pharmacy websites, everything. I could not find, and I'm like, this is like the most mild, it's topical. Like, why can't I find this? I was like, I can find finasteride for days. I can find like all these other drugs that I want to. And I'm just like, why can't I find something that's a topical that you rub on that's using beauty?
Have you guys
find a simple answer as to why latanoprost grows hair? I found this study, but we're coming up on almost an hour, so I'm not going to read the study. Yeah. But
okay.
But yeah, but when I was typing it in, it was mentioning glaucoma. When I was typing in latanoprost, I was like, how does latanoprost? And it was like help with glaucoma. I was like, that's freaking crazy. That's really crazy. You got some people where they got glaucoma and now their hair is just like growing out of their their eyelashes and eyebrows. It's wild.
On the hair thing, real quick, and then we can wrap it all up. The peptide that I was just researching with is GHKCU. It's naturally occurring in our body and increases when we get an injury. But it helps with healing and it helps with skin, and it's more in the beauty realm of things, but it could be in bodybuilding as well for like injury prevention and stuff like that. But also there's data out there that it shows increase in the number of, I remember the thickness. It could be the number of hair follicles too. And people use it for hair regrowth as well, which I'll probably be testing this fall. So
it's like GHKU copper or something like that.
Yes. Super, super interesting peptide. We had talked about it briefly earlier. It's like a BPC. Yeah. BPC, right, helps almost everything that has been tested. I haven't found one study where it didn't help something. And right, like it's just like you should just take BPC almost like a vitamin. Not really, but so good. It's so good. This is like one of those studies that does a synopsis of all the collected literature up to that point, and they didn't have any negatives on it, and it was like anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, and it helps with wound healing, it helps with this, it helps with this, and I was like, holy, this is amazing, and it helps with skin wrinkles, and it helps with the elasticity of your skin, and I was like, it helps with hair, all this other stuff. But I'm sure we could go on for hours. I want to take a second and just appreciate both of you sharing your time and your knowledge with myself, but also with everybody else here. Any quick closing thoughts you guys had?
Imagine these like peptides that we're talking about right now. These are like first generation peptides. Wait till like the second and third one. Like I think peptides are going to be the future of medicine. Personally, I'm really interested to see where all this goes. As long as big pharma doesn't block it and mess it up. But Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just tag on to that. Peptides, I didn't think that the FDA was going to legalize any of them because they are so anti-cancer, longevity, and there's really, really not that many downsides to any of the peptides. There's a few that have a little bit of downsides here and there, but they're not that drastic because our body naturally creates them. I think that they're the future if the FDA doesn't block them. They're letting some in, so I think we're going to see them slowly. And I'm really curious to see what comes up in the future too. For instance, that peptide I hadn't even heard of because they're figuring out more and more. I think they only know about like 100 and something. Like they know that there's 100 something in the body. They only know a very little bit of them, like 50 or 70 of them, something like that.
You had mentioned the basically the retardation of the cells that can cause issues. It can cause issues with your skin in terms of like that's why your skin gets fucked up as you get older and other things. So what GHKCU does is actually at the gene level, and it increases the expression of a bunch of genes that tend to decrease over time, and decreases the expression of genes that have like we can get into it in another video, but it is I got the same type of excited feeling I got about this that I did with BPC when I started learning about
That's
BPC
cool.
years ago.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
I'm gonna have to read about it.
So awesome. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for everybody else who's listening. If you guys have any questions or topics for new videos for us, leave them in the comments. If you want to help out the channel, tell somebody else about us. We're trying to grow and provide valuable information to everybody in the marketplace, and we enjoy doing this. So appreciate you guys.
And if you're watching on YouTube, all of our socials will be down in the description. We also have links to all the different affiliates and sponsors that we work with. I'll try to get that on the podcast. I'll try to get the social links at the bottom. But yeah, it was awesome talking with you guys. I mean, talk about so much cool stuff. I mean, you can get a tan with peptides, but we'll talk about that next time. Anything last words, David?
No, I mean, I get excited. I learn something new on this podcast every single time I'm on it. It's fun.
Oh, yeah.
I'm having a good time.
It's freaking awesome. And we do a good amount of research. So, I mean, just learn something that you never even heard of before that does so much cool stuff. I just want to keep talking, but we're getting long-winded.
Yeah, I have to research a peptide. I haven't researched a peptide in such a long time because I already know the ones that I need to know. And I do deep dives into like steroid research, and then like now I have a reason to research a peptide again. I'm excited.
On the peptide thing and the legality and the FDA and all that stuff, I have a friend that owns a compounding pharmacy, an FDA-approved compounding pharmacy, and they know people that we don't know, right? I'm sure. And they're at a different stage in their life than we are. It looks, from their point of view, he thinks that it is probably going to be legal at some point in the relatively near future, whether that be 2 years to 10 years or something like that. Because, like what you said, awesome, fucking amazing benefits, and like very, like almost no side effects or virtually no side effects.
So on patented stuff, it usually is a 5 to 7 year process to get something through the entire process. I think it's around 5 to 7 years. So, but the BBC has been around for a while. They were using it like with NFL players behind the scenes for a super long time. Like first time I ever used it was like 6-7 years ago. I think we were talking about like forever ago, like before even people knew what it was. And it was like an underground thing. BBC, what are you talking? What was that? Is that like a bomb? I'm like, no, it's not a bomb.
GHK Copper could be the next BPC, and we're just talking about it now. You learned about it on the Too Much Test podcast. You guys want to wrap it up?
Yeah.
We're just
going to keep talking. We're going to just keep talking if we don't wrap it up. Okay.
Maybe we should pick peptides next time. We should all pick a peptide and deep dive or something like that.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, guys.
Awesome. We can pick one topic on it or blood. I'm down to talk about it. I learned something. I appreciate you guys' time and sharing your information with me.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for listening. Tell your friends. Too Much Test podcast.
All right.